Good morning. Welcome to our webinar on lump sum funding in Horizon Europe. My name is Ulrich Genschel and I'm a head of sector in the European Commission working on the simplification of our processes for Horizon Europe. Together with my colleague Andrea Kikosch, I'm going to explain today how lump sum funding works in Horizon Europe. Before we start, let me quickly go through the agenda. I'm going to start by giving an overview presentation covering most of the details of how this new scheme works. And that is going to be followed by a session with 3 guests who already have quite some experience with lump sum funding. Now, lump sum funding may be new to you, but we've been using it since 2018, so quite a few organizations have already substantial experience, and our guests are going to share this with you in the second part of the webinar. Then we're going to have a mini short break to let you put your questions that you may have after you've listened to the presentation and to the discussion with the guests. Upvote other questions in Slido, and then we'll still have in the third part of the webinar plenty of time to answer your questions. Now, I would start straight away with the presentation. As announced as the first part, maybe 2 key principles for that to bear in mind. Lump sum funding of Horizon Europe grants works for most aspects and as much as possible like traditional grants. So if you have experience with traditional grants in the framework program from Horizon 2020 or from Horizon Europe not using lump sums, then switching to lump sums is not that difficult because only a limited number of aspects are new. And I'm trying to go and focus on those aspects that are actually different in lump sum funding. I might not be able to cover all the last details in that 30-40 minute presentation, but of course, you're going to have the possibility to ask questions, and I'm going to show you where to find further guidance and information. So let's see if Why do we use lump sum funding in the first place? You see 3 main reasons on this slide, and in no particular order. Everybody agrees that we need to reduce the financial error rate in the framework program, and we believe that lump sums are a major tool to achieve this. There is very significant simplification potential because the use of actual costs and the reporting of actual cost remains very complex and error-prone despite all our efforts in the last 10 or more years to simplify that traditional system. So actual costs will always have to accommodate all the various different practices in all the countries that participate across Europe and the world. So there is a limit as to how simple that can be. In lump sum funding, we have no reporting of actual costs and we have no reporting of resources, and there's no obligation to keep any such documents, invoices, or timesheets, and that is the major source of making it less simple because fewer documents to be kept, monitored, and checked means fewer errors in the end, and of course less administration, especially beneficiaries that have not the capacity and have not the experience of long-standing participation in the framework program benefit from this easier approach. And then last but certainly not least, we really need to focus more on content. Over the years, I believe we've developed overall a culture of focusing far too much on financial management, but the framework program is not about spending money. It is about doing research and innovation, and that's where we need to focus on the most. What I already mentioned, we believe that lump sum funding is really beneficial for small and new beneficiaries, and they are in fact the vast majority, they represent the vast majority of the participants in Horizon Europe and Horizon 2020. The data you see in the graph on the right-hand side are from Horizon 2020. We had the same picture already in FP7. 2 programs ago, and we expect no different pattern in Horizon Europe. In other words, there is, on the right-hand side, you see a rather small number of big participants that have more than 100 grants, so big universities, big research organizations, a few big companies. And then on the left-hand side, you see a massive amount of very small SMEs, newcomers that that only have 1 grant in the whole framework program. And with only 1 grant in 7 years, we cannot expect those small participants to have the experience or to have the administrative structure to deal with actual costs. What we need is a system that works the first time you use it, and here lump sums have a clear advantage. Of course, we know lump sum funding is not brand new, but is still relatively new. You may now use it for the very first time. So we know that there are still some concerns, and we are aware of those. For example, it may take more time to set up a proposal, or there might be less flexibility in grant management, or a higher risk in terms of financial certainty. We haven't really seen any of those risks materializing, but we take this seriously and we try to address this with improvements wherever possible. So, of course, we are also aware that some of this is based on misunderstandings because, well, when it comes to more work at the proposal level, we are at pains to point out that also actual cost grants need a detailed budget planning, not only lump sum grants. And the only difference is, you will see later in more detail, that those details need to be shared in lump sum proposal, while in actual cost proposal, you keep them to yourself, but you still have to have them. I'm not going to go into more detail here. Let's go on and see how lump sum funding actually works in practice. We have 2 lump sum options. The first one is type 1, where the lump sum is fixed in the work program. So there's no option for the applicant to choose the amount they go for. The amount is fixed and only that amount can be awarded. Currently, there's only 1 example in place, that is the ERC proof of concept call. They've been using this for relatively small grants very successfully since a number of years. Currently, there's no other scheme using this, but ERC proof of concept is, for this approach is working very well. However, for the bulk of lump sum calls, we are using type 2, which is even more similar, we could say, to the traditional actual cost proposals, because you define your budget yourself, you determine the amount that you want to apply for in your proposal. So in your proposal, you include a detailed budget, you justify it, it goes through evaluation, and then that is the amount that is awarded, possibly after some corrections after evaluation. When you write a lump sum proposal, again, you use more or less the same approach as in any other proposal for Horizon Europe. That is, you have the standard application form. There's no special application form for lump sum proposals. It is the very same as for all other grants, for all other proposals. And you present your project, the objectives, the methodology, exactly in the same way as in any other proposal. Likewise, of course, you describe the activities in the work packages exactly in the same way. We've recently slightly updated the proposal form to give you a little bit more guidance on how to describe these activities. Again, the same for all proposals, nothing specific for lump sums. However, as I mentioned, you need to include and justify the lump sum budget, and for that you have an additional detailed budget table in the lump sum proposal. This takes the form of an Excel file, which you can find in the submission system. So when you apply for a proposal in the topic using lump sums, you will find this Excel form to be used. You complete it and you upload it later as an annex to your proposal. We'll see that in a little bit more detail now. For this budget table, what you need to do is you provide cost estimations for each cost category. And of course, we know this cannot be accurate because your cost estimations up front, we expect only to be the best estimate at the time of writing the proposal. It is clear that this cannot be as accurate as a cost declared after you've had it, ex post, we say. So this is the approach that you try and provide the most reasonable and best estimated budget you can. So the best approximation of the actual costs expected for that project. And then later we will check that these are following the same eligibility rules as any other grants. In other words, the cost that you include in your lump sum proposal, they must meet the same eligibility criteria as the cost in any other grant. And of course, they must be in line with your normal practices, they must be reasonable, non-excessive, and they must be necessary for your activities. But they don't need to be accurate to the euro. They just need to be reasonable and well estimated, and they need to be justified by the proposal. So when you fill these details in this Excel table, the Excel table will automatically calculate the lump sum that comes out of it, taking, for example, into account the 25% flat rate for indirect costs, if and as applicable for the various cost categories. It'll also take into account the funding rates of the various participants in that grant, and out comes the final lump sum and the breakdown of lump sum shares per work package and per participant. Again, we'll see a little bit what this looks like. And of course, you have more details and instructions directly in that budget table. You have also a copy of that in the Funding and Tenders portal, but I urge you, don't use that information copy, let's say, in the Funding and Tenders portal. Use the copy that comes with your proposal writing, with the submission system in the portal, specifically for your topic. Another thing that you should pay attention when writing a lump sum proposal are the work packages and how you design work packages. Now, given that you'll see later, work packages are lump sum payments are done by work package. So whenever a work package is complete, we'll pay the amount pre-agreed for that work package. So that means the way you design your work package and you structure the work plan has an influence on the payment schedule. Whenever a work package is complete and it can be declared at the end of a reporting period and will then be paid. Now, that means if you have work packages that span the entire life of the project, you will only be paid for that work at the end of the project. If you need to be paid for that work already in between, you are free to split that work package in two or, for example, in as many parts as there are reporting periods. The main example that we normally use is project management. So project management very often is a work package that spans from the very start to the very end of the project. And you may want to split that in project management work packages, one for each reporting period. In this way, you will be able to be paid for each reporting period for your project management work. However, bear in mind, when you split work packages, the resulting work plan still needs to be effective and still needs to be manageable. It still requires that the resulting work packages are major subdivisions of the work plan. We don't expect work packages that are individual tasks, for example, or micro work packages. So the experts that we are asked to evaluate lump sum proposals will certainly be briefed that there are to be expected a few more work packages than in standard grants, but they are also asked to make sure that the work plan still is effective and that the individual work packages still make sense as sizable subdivisions of the work. Now here you see a practical example. You have here the one I mentioned, project management, something on the top panel here. You see that management work package spans 4 years, 3 reporting periods, a standard project of 4 years divided into 3 reporting periods. And you may, if you like, but you are not, I should just emphasize, there is no obligation, of course, to do this splitting. The splitting is entirely voluntary. It's an offer that you can do in order, as in this example, to get paid for your management work at the end of each reporting period. But if you deem this is not necessary to ensure the cash flow of your project, then probably it's better to not do it and to leave the work package structure as you would have done it anyway. So coming to the evaluation of lump sum proposals, again, Mostly this works in exactly the same way as for any other proposal. It'll be evaluated against the 3 standard criteria: excellence, impact, and implementation. The only thing that comes on top is that the detailed lump sum budget table is going to be evaluated as part of the implementation criteria, which is where the budget and the quality of the implementation of the project is addressed. And here the experts I already mentioned, the main focus of them is not to look at individual euro amounts and whether something could have been 10 euros more or less, but they are asked to make sure that your estimations are reasonable and non-excessive. That is the key criterion to make sure that we don't much overpay or that we fund much underfunded projects. So there's no point in underestimating and no point in overestimating the costs. They should be as close to the expected actual costs for your project as possible and as well justified as possible, which is again true for all projects, of course, for all proposals, that the resources and the costs need to be justified based on the proposal and the type of activities you are proposing. So if experts find that certain costs are overestimated, they will make concrete recommendations, and then through the evaluation summary report you will learn that some things need to be modified, and these modifications can then be implemented before the grant is signed. Now, the good news is that even if there are small corrections to the budget, that will not lead to a decreased score. So in basically all or almost all cases, corrections to the budget will not really affect your chances to be funded because that has no negative impact on the score. It'll only mean a slightly corrected budget. Only in case that your budget is really completely flawed, there is a lot of information missing, or otherwise it cannot be evaluated properly. That could lead to a decreased score because then you really didn't provide a functioning, a proper proposal for the budget that we can evaluate. In such case, you indeed can be punished with a decreased score. In that case, it would lead to a lower chance to be funded, of course. But I repeat, this is rare. Normally, if there's only a few, several even small things that need to be corrected in the budget, you'll have no change in score and no change in your chances to be funded. Now, one thing that is a key element in the evaluation is the dashboard, where we show, let's say, the normal range of personnel costs. This is used as an orientation by the experts. What is shown here is the personnel costs that were signed in actual cost grants since 2022. We've very recently updated these data again, so it shows data loaded from April 2024 based on the grants that were signed in Horizon Europe from 2022 onwards. And what you can see is the amount of person months that were funded at a given rate, and this data is resolved by country and by organization type. Now, across Europe and beyond, across the whole world, because far more countries than just Europe are participating in the framework program, we have very large differences in the structure of personnel costs. This is why this orientation is necessary for our experts. And you can, of course, when writing your proposal, also access this resource and see where your costs are in comparison to the data displayed for your country and your organization type. The example given here, research organizations in Romania and research organizations in Germany, give you an example how far apart personnel cost structures can go. I could probably have found examples that are even further apart than these two. So when you look at this resource and when writing your proposal and you find that the costs that you intend to apply for personnel are above the range shown here, which is the range from the 20th to the 80th percentile, then please make sure that in the comments tab of the detailed budget table, you explain this. Effectively, then you're in a situation where your costs are among the 20% most expensive of your peers. In other words, you are then among the 20% most expensive research organizations in Romania, or among the 20% most expensive research organizations in Germany, if your costs are to the right-hand side of the distribution shown here. And in this case, we would like you to make sure to explain why that is. And this will certainly be taken into account by the experts, because costs above this 80 percentile are certainly acceptable, and it's not that they would be rejected just because they are above the range shown here, but we want to learn why this is necessary. And you'll find more information on the dashboard landing page on how to deal with that. But I can urge you, make sure that you include that information in case you're really above in the comments tab of the detailed budget table. Of course, let me add also, in case you are below or anywhere inside this distribution, costs generally need to be justified. It's just that we want a specific and explicit extra justification in case you are above this distribution. Coming to grant preparation. Again, we follow the standard process, and you will have a dedicated model grant agreement for lump sum grants that is slightly different than the model grant agreement for actual cost grants. But again, the vast majority of articles in this model grant agreement are the same, except those articles that deal with actual costs. Those don't exist anymore in the lump sum grants, and financial obligations. But we also apply the no negotiation principle. That means, in principle, we put your grant together based on the proposal submitted as evaluated. But of course, there can be some changes. Obviously, we need to adjust the lump sum in case the experts told us it is overestimated. It's clear that we can never really increase the amount that you asked for, but there is the possibility that it is decreased. I can actually already share that most grants that we select in lump sum funding, some 90% go through the evaluation without any changes. So really the vast majority gets the amount that they ask for. Roughly 10% have a cut, but even in those 10%, the cuts are generally rather small and in the area of 1% or lower. So only few exceptions we see where cuts are a bit more significant. Then what we introduce into this grant is the breakdown of lump sum shares per work package and per partner. This is the financial annex, which will then later determine how the grant is paid at the end of each reporting period. So that is taken from the detailed budget table that you filled in, but the cost details themselves are not anymore part of the grant agreement. So let's say the philosophy of lump sum funding is that up to the time that we sign the grant agreement, we look at the detailed cost estimations, and we may have to change things based on the evaluation. But once the grant is signed, we are not going to come back on that lump sum. The lump sum is then deemed to have been agreed, and we will not question it after signing the grant agreement. We will then pay this lump sum as the grant is executed. That also includes, of course, in case that after grant signature, prices change. And this can absolutely happen in both directions. We might have, for example, included budget for a piece of equipment. Piece of equipment might 2 years later have become cheaper. We will not return to the grant agreement and change the budget for that reason. But in the other case that the equipment has become more expensive after 2 years, we will also not get back to the grant agreement, and you will not change the lump sum. But that situation, I must point out, is also similar, is the same as in any other grant, because also in actual cost grants, the maximum grant amount is not changed in case of inflation, or in case of increasing prices, or in case some costs actually decrease. The maximum grant amount always stays the same. And here you see this table with the budget shares, with the lump sum shares. This is the breakdown I mentioned a couple of times before. You see the beneficiaries of the grant in the rows and you see the work packages in the columns. You see that different beneficiaries participate in different work packages. And for each work package, each beneficiary has their share in that work package fixed in that table. So beneficiary A has a share of 250,000 euro in work package 1, beneficiary C has a share of 100,000 in work package 1, and so on. So if work package 1 is paid in full, is completed, it will be paid in full 350,000 because that is what we have fixed already at time of signing the grant agreement. It's important to note that while this looks maybe strict, you have any flexibility to use this budget as you see fit. You don't declare any costs. The only thing that you need to make sure is that the work package was actually completed. And if it's completed, you will get the amount that was pre-agreed for the work package. No further questions asked, and also how it is distributed inside the consortium is entirely your business. The Commission is not going to learn about it because you're not going to report on any cost aspects. The payment schedule is exactly the same as in an actual cost grant. So we have a pre-financing payment. The rules for the pre-financing and the way it's calculated and the amount that results is exactly the same as in any other grant. So the usual approach currently is that we have, I think, 160% divided by the number of reporting periods and a maximum of 80%. So a project with 2 reporting periods would have a pre-financing of 80% of the total amount for the grant. And that is exactly the same, I have to stress again, as for any other grant. There's nothing specific for lump sums. Interim payments, again, we do a payment at the end of each reporting period. So the timing is the same as in any other grant. Now, what happens here in lump sum grants is that we look at the work packages that you declared were completed in that reporting period. And if agreed by the project officer, these work packages will be paid as pre-agreed. And then at the end of the grant, we pay the balance. That means any final work packages that have not been completed so far, you declare, and at this point you can declare work packages as partially completed as well. That is, normally, of course, we expect that you will complete the full grant and you complete all the work packages, but it can be that you didn't manage to complete every last work package to the end fully, and then you get the possibility to declare a work package completed, for example, to only 80 or 90%. Again, if that is agreed, these amounts will be paid, and of course also, like in any other grant, we release the amount for the mutual insurance mechanism that was kept at the beginning of the grant. Amendments in lump sums, again, can be done more or less in the same way. The process for amendments has been aligned with that in actual cost grants, so there is no change, no difference in the process really. Previously in Horizon 2020, we still had a slightly stricter amendment process for lump sum grants. That's been changed. We see that is not necessary. You use the same procedure now. And the only thing to bear in mind really is that once a work package has been paid and accepted, you cannot amend it anymore, because we consider that as a part of the project that is now being completed. We don't reopen that work package, so to say, anymore, so it can also not be amended anymore. We only look at work packages that you are still working on and you will declare in the future. Maybe this point at the bottom here is worth mentioning, that you don't really need a grant agreement amendment for every aspect. You can very well also use the so-called simplified procedure. That is, you put deviations in the report. When you, in your technical report, there's a specific section for deviations from the work plan. When you declare and you explain and you justify deviations from the work plan as it is in the grant agreement, and the report is accepted, with that the deviation is also accepted, and the consequence is, legally speaking, the same as going through a formal amendment procedure earlier. Reporting and payment. So that is really something that got a lot easier with lump sums. Because, well, for the reporting, the technical part, you use the standard template. The template is no different. It's very slightly simpler because any part of the reporting template that deals with resources and costs has been removed. So any part dealing with resources is marked as not applicable for lump sum grants, but otherwise all the elements of the technical report are the same as for any other grant in Horizon Europe. So then the coordinator declares to us which work packages are completed or which haven't been completed. And then, of course, you should make sure that in your technical report it becomes clear why you believe that a work package has been completed. This is what the project officer is going to check. And when the project officer is convinced that indeed you completed a given work package, that will trigger the payment. Right, I think that's... maybe I should mention already here that at the end, you get the possibility to declare work packages as partial. This is not possible during the project. When you go through your project and at an intermediate payment stage, you can only declare something as fully complete or you don't declare it. We don't take partially completed work packages throughout the project, only at the end. The idea behind is that we want you to complete all work packages and we want you to take your time, and if you haven't managed to complete a work package as maybe planned by the end of the first reporting period, take the time to the end of the subsequent reporting period to complete it and declare it then. Again, maybe already here, lump sum payments are not dependent on a successful outcome. That is maybe the core DNA of lump sum funding. What we pay is your effort, is your carrying out the activities. We do not pay or we do not make payments dependent on a successful outcome. So whether you reached certain results or you reached certain objectives is not the question here when it comes to payment. Of course, this is desirable, but this is not what determines whether we pay or not a work package. That is solely determined by the question whether you actually did the work as described in the grant agreement. So the payment is calculated in a rather simple way, and also we can, on this basis, automatically generate the financial statement. You have declared which work packages are complete. Then let's say this is accepted. What happens is the system will automatically calculate and generate the financial statements, which the coordinator will sign on behalf of the consortium. So here in this example, we have work package 1 is complete. Both parts have been completed. So we have a payment of 350,000 euro. Work package 2 is still ongoing. Several parts have not been completed, so no payment at that stage. Work package 3 is complete, so the full amount is paid. And again, work package 4 is ongoing. Work package 5 has not yet been started, so work package 4 and 5 are not paid at this stage. The payment is a simple sum of the pre-agreed shares for work package 1 and 3, and the financial statements are going to point this out, also break down the amounts for the beneficiaries involved in the 2 work packages that are paid at this stage, that is beneficiary A, B, and C. So an important part, of course, in this whole question is what and how do we accept work packages? Because I said that is the key question. Have you completed your work package? And if yes, we'll pay the pre-agreed share. So generally speaking, of course, we expect you to have done the activities as described in the work package. But we can also accept, and this is sort of not very strict, but what we can do is we can also accept your work package when all essential tasks have been completed, or when you have done equivalent tasks, or when you have deviated, but your deviations have been justified and they can be accepted. So that is the principle of accepting a work package if it, in essence, has been carried out. We don't apply a stricter standard here than we apply to actual cost grants. So there is no intention to expect a higher level or a better performance from lump sum grants than from actual cost grants. There's no basis for that. We just have simplified the financial aspects, but it's not that lump sum grants as such are expected and need to perform higher than actual cost grants. like in actual cost grants, we have these possibilities to accept also a delivery of the project that is not exactly as described in the project, as long as the deviations make sense, have been explained, and are in the sense of creating the best value out of the grant. And of course, I mentioned before, your lump sum grant can be amended. So whenever you have, whenever you see that the technical scientific development of your project requires to change the direction of the project, as in any grant, you can amend it to adapt to these new circumstances and to allow you to complete the work packages, because the work packages that were conceived at the time of proposal writing 2 or 3 or 4 years later may not make much sense anymore, and you might need to change this setup in order to be able to be in a position to complete your work package. And then, especially in lump sum grants, I suggest that you make use of this possibility to amend the grant in a way that puts you in a position to complete your work packages in a meaningful way. In case that work packages are rejected, of course, you will have the possibility to reply to the observations of the project officer, and only after that, after you explained why really you believe, in fact, they are complete, will the project officer take a final decision. If this rejection takes place at an intermediate stage of the project, we are not going to make any payment. There is the work package has not been rejected as such, is in a way just postponed. We expect you to then improve on that work package and declare it as completed later. And then again, we are going to check whether completion is satisfactory, and if yes, then you will be paid for that very work package at a later stage. So a rejection of a work package at intermediate stage should not be confused with rejection of a payment or something. It is just postponing the payment for that work package to the time that you declare it again in an improved form. And then at the very end, I mentioned already, that is the point in time when you may, for example, because you haven't been able for technical reasons or for force majeure, you haven't been able to really complete every work package, then you can declare one or more work package as partially completed, and you should again use the best estimate for the percentage that you declare based on the activities that you have done. So if you have completed 90% of the activities, you declare 90%. This has again nothing to do with the amount of money that you actually spent on this project or on this work package. You should base your completion on the share of activities really carried out, and this is also the measuring stick that the project officer is going to put on to use when checking your work packages fully completed or partially completed. In practice, what we see is that the vast majority of work packages are paid. So what we see is we have in the Horizon 2020 pilot, of which a lot of the grants have been completed by now, but not all. We have had 1,600 work packages in total, and 852 of those have by now been paid. So they are part of grants that have been completed. As I said, only at the final payment do we know what is the final lump sum amount that was paid. And what we can see is that 99% of those cases were paid as declared. This includes also some cases where people declared less than 100%. But so 99% of the cases were paid as the beneficiaries, as the consortium asked for. And the vast majority of those, again, is that the full lump sum was paid. And only in 1% of the cases did we have a partial rejection, because the project officer found that no, you have not completed the project to the extent that you declared. But this is, as you can see, a rare event. And then at intermediate payment, I don't have really full quantitative data here, but we know from experience that rejection of work packages happen at intermediate stage. But this again is also rather rare, again in the order of magnitude of 1% or less. So most work packages we see in practice that are declared at the intermediate payment are paid, and most of them that are declared at the end of the project are paid. So the overall level of paying lump sums is very high, 99% plus. So we see really no evidence that there is increased financial risk for beneficiaries because the lump sum that we agree at the beginning really reaches the beneficiaries, and to almost 100%. Ex post controls. When your grant is over, your controls, the grant is of course subject to ex post controls like any other Horizon Europe grants, and we can in particular review the proper implementation of the action through a technical review, for example. But of course, such grants have also many other non-financial obligations, and compliance with those can be reviewed just as well, just in the same way as for any other grants. This could be IPR or ethics, open science. There's quite a few so-called non-financial obligations which are exactly the same as in any other grant, no different for lump sums, and you can of course be reviewed for having complied with those. But there will be no checks, no reviews, and no audits on the financial aspects. That is the key difference. So what effect do you have on keeping records? So on the left-hand side, you see the documents that you need to keep. And these are all the technical documents. In short, these are the documents that you need to show that the project was properly implemented. And in short, they are the same as for any other grant. There is no additional document that you need to keep for lump sum grants that you do not need to keep for actual cost grants. Nothing in addition. It is the documentation that you need to show the grant was actually carried out. On the right-hand side, you see what you don't need anymore, and this is, for example, timesheets, payslips, your depreciation policy, any invoices, in other words, any document showing that actual costs were incurred, because those are not submitted and those are not checked anymore. Of course, important to bear in mind that whatever internal procedure applies in your organization, or whatever is necessary to comply with the national and laws, or laws applying to your organization locally, that you still need to comply with. This is outside the grant agreement that you sign with us. So obviously you need to keep those obligations, you need to comply with those obligations outside the grant agreement that you have from national law or from local practices. For further information, I can really recommend our dedicated lump sum page on the Funding and Tenders portal. In particular, our set of video tutorials I think is useful for newcomers. We have an overview of how lump sum funding is working, how the detailed budget table should be completed, and how the dashboard is working as really key elements to understand the whole concept and to see how the budget is set up and evaluated. And beyond that, there is a couple of more formal guidance documents, all of which you find here linked on that page on the Funding and Tenders portal. So what's going to happen next? Well, we promised we are going to monitor lump sum funding tightly, and this is indeed happening. We have a follow-up study in the making to the one that we released in 2021. I hope that we can release this before summer. We are at an advanced stage. We had a big survey among all lump sum participants at the end of 2023, a lot of data to be analyzed and also a lot of implementation data. All of that is going to go into a second, more comprehensive lump sum assessment to be released soon. Then the ex post control strategy, the technical reviews that we are going to employ are under preparation. We expect that a small number of reviews will be needed to make sure that lump sum grants really are implemented properly, and more details will be shared soon. And generally speaking, we are going to continue our stepwise phasing in. You know that we had a low amount of lump sum funding at the beginning of Horizon Europe based on the pilot. Also taking into account that many stakeholders asked that we shouldn't introduce lump sum funding too quickly, so that at the first years we were still very cautious about it and used that time to strongly improve the guidance and the support that we have for lump sum grants. But then in 23 we stepped up significantly, devoting some 10% of the total call budget to lump sums, and now in 2024 we reach nearly 30% of the call budget for lump sums with a possible further increase in 2025. In fact, we believe that it would be good to go to 50% by the end of Horizon Europe. Now, that is not yet set in stone, but the Commission intends to further increase step by step the use of this instrument, lump sums, to make funding simpler and more accessible. With that, I'm at the end of the presentation. We now have our discussion with our guests, and I hand over to my colleague Andrea Kikosch.
Thank you very much. So we will indeed have a panel discussion with 3 guest speakers that are involved directly in lump sum projects under Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe. So they can really share some best practices and useful lessons learned with us. And we are very happy to welcome today Ioana Zergiotti, professor at the National Technical University of Athens. She coordinates the lump sum project under Horizon 2020 called Tumor LNOC. I also welcome Maria Kajalova, project manager at RINA Consulting in Belgium. She has been involved in several lump sum projects from Shift2Rail and Europe's Rail joint undertaking, among which the project PINTA 2 that ended a couple of years ago. And last but not least, a warm welcome to Helena Dean, which is the project manager at Western Development Commission, a public body in Ireland. And she coordinates the Horizon Europe lump sum project Spectra. So in the next half hour, we will have a conversation on the practical aspects of lump sum funding. And if you have specific questions to address to our speakers, please do so. Please use Slido, and we will then allocate these questions later on to our speakers. They will stay with us until the end of the webinar. So now I propose to start, as usual, with some introductory questions. And so I will start with you, Ioana. Could you introduce yourself and the lump sum project that you are coordinating? So when did it start? At what stage is it now?
Great. Thank you very much, first of all, for inviting me to present our experience on lump sum project. I'm Ioana Zergiotti. I'm professor at the National Technical University of Athens, and I'm coordinating I'm coordinating tumor lymph node on a chip project, which has been started since 3 years now, since 1st of May, 3 years ago, 2021, sorry. And the project is about, it is a project that involves about 10 partners, and we are the coordinators at the ICCS and the UA. We have the Technical University of Eindhoven, we have Bioacademy of Athens, Aarhus, Alps, Reifos, Technical University of Vienna, Elvesis, Fosprint, Asphalion, and Amires. With Amires, we are working together on the management and administrative aspects. So the lymph node, the tumor lymph node on a chip project is a project that aims to develop a tumor and lymph node platform on a chip for the monitor of 3D models and microfluidic chips, which will connect the lung cancer patients with appropriate therapy. So this is at a very high level description and the partners of this consortium. Overall, our experience so far is very, very positive from the lump sum project. Initially, we were a bit concerned about the new scheme, to be honest, and we would try to figure out which are the differences. We were a bit concerned about the fact that the technical, the completion of the work packages should be completed, and this we couldn't understand. I mean, how is this quantified at the end? And that was a reason of concern. But I mean, after 3 years, we see that it is much more flexible with less administration. and with good communication with the project officer, which we are happy to have. Everything is quite, we can change things because that was our concern in the beginning. So this is as a first impression, and please, if you have any other questions, I'm happy to respond.
Some more specific questions a bit later on. So now I will turn to Maria with a similar question. So could you introduce yourself and the lump sum projects that you are involved in? So at what stage are they now?
You are muted, Maria.
Sorry. Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Maria Kajaova. I'm a research and development financial manager working for RINA Consulting. So I've been involved in EU-funded projects in the past 13 years. So I started, so there were FP7 projects, then Horizon 2020, and now Horizon Europe projects. I started being involved in lump sum projects since 2018. So I had the opportunity to participate in the proposal preparation, grant agreement preparation, and then the project management of several projects. In fact, I'm supporting the coordinator on all the administrative and financial aspects. I'm particularly working with Shift2Rail joint undertaking and now Europe's Rail joint undertaking. So the project I'll talk about is Pinta 2. So it was for the development of concepts towards the next generation of traction systems and the management of wheel adhesions. The project started in September 2018 and it's now completed. So it lasted for 30 months. There were 9 partners and 6 affiliated entities. So the project is completed and it was fully paid. So maybe for more practical questions can be answered later on. So thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you, Maria. And I will also turn to Helena and ask you to introduce yourself and the lump sum project that you are coordinating under Horizon Europe. So when did it start? What type of project is it?
Thank you very much. So my name is Helena Dean. I'm from the Western Development Commission, a regional development agency in the west of Ireland. And I represent the project Spectra, which is stimulating performance in creative territories and regional actors, a project that was funded under Horizon Europe, European Interconnected Ecosystems. So it was, and it is the first lump sum project that we have taken part in. And what was particularly nice about it, it was, or it is a project that is 2 years in duration, and that was kind of typical for this call, that the projects were about 2 years in duration, smaller type partnerships connecting different ecosystems in Europe. So in our case, sort of moderate innovation ecosystems working with stronger ecosystems, learning, transferring good practices, transferring knowledge and methodologies in order to create a more diverse, inclusive innovation ecosystem, because the west of Ireland is considered a moderate innovator at this stage, and we are the only region in Ireland scored at this level. We're working with Bulgaria, who are an emerging innovator region, and our strong innovator regions that we are learning from and transferring from are based in Germany and Denmark, more specifically Berlin and Copenhagen ecosystems. And for us, this has been a very positive experience so far. I'm very happy to speak later on to the questions about the proposal preparation. We have started on the 1st December of the previous year, and we are due to finish this year at the end of November.
And so now we will go indeed to the more specific questions on proposal writing and grant management. And I will start with you, Helena, since you have maybe the most recent experience with that. And so compared to other proposals that you may have submitted, what kind of differences did you notice in proposal writing? So what would you advise someone considering to apply for a lump sum topic?
There is more emphasis, I suppose, on forward planning, and I would call it's short-term pain for long-term gain, because we really found, although there is a little bit more preparation needed, a little bit more focus on thinking through the actual delivery process, and also the detail of the delivery, and kind of thinking a little bit more about the flow of activities, making sure that when you're building your tasks and your activities, that you get the interdependency just right, that it has a logical sequence, and so on. It's, as has been said before, it's maybe not always possible to accurately predict every single thing, but it was still useful to kind of think maybe more about the potential risks in this scenario, more, as I said, more carefully think about the detail. And while that results maybe a little bit more effort during the proposal preparation stage, really it bears fruit, I find, during the implementation. We find, obviously, during our project meetings, focus is really very firmly on delivery, and we are able to focus more on the ideation, more on the implementation activities, and the conversation is less about administration and financial issues, which is creating, in our experience, like a very good dynamic among the partners. We feel we are achieving very good results as based on that.
Okay, thank you. And you also a bit anticipated my second question, which is that do you consider that the internal management of the project is different, or very much different, compared to other projects that you might have been involved in?
Yes, certainly. And I think there is, certain efficiency, obviously, on the organizational level, but also on the consortium level in terms of, day-to-day administration. And as I say, the whole emphasis shifts towards delivery, design of activities, developing partnerships, collaboration linkages also with external partners and so on. And I can say, obviously on behalf of our financial department, they're very happy with a lump sum project, because there's also obviously a learning curve for the internal staff who have to always kind of learn with every different type of European program. There's always differences in terms of administration, and it's definitely a time saver, and makes even organizational internal activities more efficient, in addition to the consortium dynamics. So for us, a very, very welcome change. So we are very grateful for the lump sum project.
Thank you very much, Helena, also for your feedback and for sharing your experience. And now I'm also curious about your experience, Ioana. So my first question is, what was your approach to selecting the partners in your consortium? Did your lump sum grant require a different consortium agreement than other grants?
Yes. The approach to build a consortium was quite similar, I would say. However, as we are running the project and we are in the implementation phase, we understand more and more that it's quite crucial to have a kind of to know the partners and to know that they will be reliable and they will deliver, because there is this kind of dependency of all partners who are involved in the same work packages. So we should, I mean, for the next proposals we are doing, we are very much careful that we know that, you know, we can rely on the partners and that each work package will be completed successfully, because otherwise that will have consequences to other partners as well. At least this is our understanding. So it is somehow more critical, I believe, to select the partners. About the consortium agreement, now there is a new version of DESCA for lump sum, and we're working on this model. Yes, it is a bit different because it has some kind of more emphasis on the work package leaders, for instance, because work packages are really more important than the previous and the other framework projects in the typical, I mean, framework projects we are running. So these two things, I mean, these two differences, I think, are quite different.
I see. Thank you. And now regarding the grant management aspect, would you say that the reporting for your project became easier thanks to the use of lump sum funding? So what is your experience?
Absolutely.
Yeah, with declaring.
We are really grateful to that. Absolutely. And also, you know, I will say something that is really, I mean, depends from country to country. But for instance, I mean, in Greece, we have I mean, the administration is quite difficult. I mean, we have a lot of the bureaucracy is really an issue here. And that is really relaxing a lot our work and our documents that we have to select to provide to our justification and to auditors. That was a lot of work in the other framework projects, I mean, and other projects. Now we have really, I mean, more less administrative work to do, and this is really great, I would say. The only concern I have, I would like to mention is, but I mean, listening the introductory presentation, I think that is more clear now, is about all these rules about the timing of the completion of the work package. That was in the beginning was quite, I mean, scary. That we thought that if the work package is not fully completed and has been finished as planned in the grant agreement, that there is no way back. So we cannot revise and we cannot complete the work package technically. But now I see that there is this option, which is also great.
Okay, thank you very much.
All positive comments from my side. I mean, it's a really great experience.
Thank you for sharing your experience. And now I will turn to Maria for the last round of questions. Did any of your lump sum projects required any technical amendments? And if yes, what was the main reason? And did it work as expected?
Yes. So for Pinto2 projects, we had 2 amendments. And also for other projects, we see that we need at least 1 amendment during the project lifetime. The most common modification that we had to implement is to reschedule some tasks or work packages or some deliverables, which means in order to ensure that partners have a bit more time to complete the work packages, in order to avoid at the end of the project to declare some work packages partially completed. For this reason, most of the projects are usually extended. From my experience, it's usually from 3 up to 8 months extension. and partners managed to complete the work and complete all the work packages. What is important to know, it was also previously mentioned that if a work package is completed, it cannot be amended anymore. So if you need more time, what is important is to have, of course, good communication with the project officer and also to inform about any deviations. And of course, if you need more time to complete, so then the work packages needs to be extended a bit. Another common modification is to update the budget per work package or some shifts among beneficiaries. But then for this kind of changes, we really need to technically justify the modification. In some cases, when something cannot be done by one beneficiary and someone else is doing the work, then of course we need to do this shift among beneficiaries and modify the lump sum shares accordingly. A lesson learned is don't prepare an amendment or start an amendment close to the end of the reporting period, because if we don't have the amendment approved, which may take a certain time, so the reporting session will not be open. Consequently, the reporting will be delayed and the interim payment. So if you do an amendment, please anticipate in advance, so in order not to have a delay in the reporting and, as I mentioned, the interim payments. Again, keep the project officer informed if you face any difficulties, so you can really discuss and to see the steps that you need to do in order to make sure that everything is going smoothly.
Thank you. These are some very good points to make. And one last question. As one of your lump sum projects already ended, so it was completed, did you receive the full lump sum in the end, or was there a partial payment? And also,
yes,
generally, what would you advise other lump sum coordinators regarding the management of their grant?
Yes, so the project was fully completed. As I already mentioned, it was extended by 3 months in order to make sure the work packages are completed. So everything was 100% completed, and it was fully paid. What I would advise, and we found it very really, let's say, positive, is since the proposal preparation, so we organized some kind of informative sessions to partners, informing about all the lump sum principles, what they are expected, the payments based on work packages completed, etc. Because sometimes partners, they're not so familiar with this new approach. So in order to make sure that everyone is aware and what should be expected during the project lifetime, it's really important. Of course, you put more time to do this, but it's really very beneficial for everyone and the consortium to avoid any issues during the project lifetime. And another thing is really during also the proposal phase to clearly define the project structure, to organize it in a way that, for example, if you want to have some interim payments to some work packages needs to be completed before the reporting period ends in order to assure this cash flow. So my main advice is really to put more effort in the proposal phase, to explain everything to the whole consortium, so they are clearly aware of what is expected on how the lump sum approach works, in order to avoid any problems during the project lifetime and to do much more amendments, or to avoid any difficult situation when the project starts.
Thank you very much, Maria. It's really useful. And thanks to all again for the discussion and for accepting our invitation to join us to the webinar. I would like to remind our audience once again that we will look at the questions soon. And also, I encourage you to also ask your questions for the speakers if you would like to know more about their experience. So please do so in Slido. Also, upvote the question that it's most interesting for you, or put your own. So please check also the questions that are in there. We should have 5 minutes break, yes, we will then afterwards start the Q&A session.
Welcome back after this short comfort break, and thank you for your questions that we received through Slido. We are now going to go through these questions, also with the help of our guests, of course, and try to answer them one by one. Starting with the first, should equipment depreciation costs be split between the work packages in which the equipment will be used? Now, I would advise you to put the equipment cost for a piece, for any given piece, into the work package where it will be used the most. And you can then, of course, in the description, in the work plan, also mention that it will also be used elsewhere as well. But the cost, since your breakdown of costs is by work package, I would not split the cost for one piece of equipment across various work packages, but put it in one in your detailed budget table. In the explanation, you can always, and also if you think that's important, if it's really split 50-50 or something, you can make a comment in the comments tab of the detailed budget table explaining that the equipment is used in various work packages. Next question. What does happen if one partner does not complete its tasks in the work package and another one does? Now, maybe I can start on this, but then I think our guests should come in on this one. It's a very practical question. Generally speaking, if your work package isn't complete because one partner hasn't done its work, well, you cannot declare it as complete. That would mean in the middle of the project, you would not declare that work package because it's not been completed. At the end of the project, you could declare this work package as partially complete, and then it is now, for financial consequences, a matter of what the evidence is and what the agreement inside the consortium is. If there is no doubt that indeed the missing activities can be assigned are due to a single partner, then indeed the reduction that will come because of this incompletion can be also assigned to that partner who's at fault. But if that cannot be established, if we don't know, and you in a way also don't agree which partner is actually responsible for the incompleteness, then the reduction will be the incomplete work package will lead to a reduction that is proportionally applied to everybody participating in that given work package. So in your situation, you describe a situation where it is perfectly clear which partner is not doing the work and which partners have done the work, in which case the partners that have done the work, but only at the end of the project, I must emphasize again, you can complete this, you can declare it partially, and the partners that have done the work can in then that case be paid completely. There is also an example like that in the lump sum guidance, in the detailed lump sum guide that you will find on the Funding and Tenders portal on the dedicated lump sum page that I mentioned in my presentation. In this detailed guide, which is, let's say, the legally binding, this is also replacing the annotated grant agreement for lump sum aspects. There you find an example that describes exactly that situation. But I emphasize again, depends all on whether it can really be established beyond doubt which partner is responsible. Maybe we have one of our guests that would like to come in, because after all, the question, what happens if one of the partners doesn't work as expected? That is a general problem, a general issue that can happen in many grants, and of course not only in lump sum grants. Not sure if any of our guests would like to come in on this question.
Yes, I raised the hand. It is Maria. So we had this situation in one project. So the two partners already anticipated to the coordinator, and the project officer asked us to do an amendment, which means that the beneficiary not doing the work released the funding, and the one who did the work took the money. So this was done via amendment. Then it was more complicated when this is not clearly announced, so it should be internal discussion and to check with the coordinator how to manage this. But to be clear for everyone, the best solution is to do it via an amendment. So then everyone is paid for the work done. Thank you.
Yes, very good aspect. If you can resolve effectively through an amendment this situation before it comes to the final payment, that is certainly the best situation. And so what I mentioned as an example that is given in the guidance I mentioned, that is really the case that at the end of the project something has not been complete and therefore you don't get the complete payment. And the question arises, how is this reduction distributed between the partners involved in the work package concerned? But if it can be, of course, clarified, if it can be resolved by amending and redistributing the tasks before the end of the work such that the work package is finally completed overall and therefore the full amount is paid, of course, I fully agree that's the best solution to a problem like this. Next question. Maybe, Andrea, would you like to take that one?
Yes. So in personnel costs for research organizations are 5.1 thousand euros, which corresponds to the 18th percentile. However, our real costs exceed 6.5 thousand euros. How can we convince evaluators we use real costs? Well, I think the best way to do it is to make use of the any comments tab of the Excel detailed budget table, where you can include as much information as you want. So you should really explain the situation, and expert evaluators will also look at that and will take this into consideration when assessing the budget or when assessing the personnel costs.
Maybe let me add, you can, of course, make sure that that you explain where and for which personnel you need which costs. So the costs that you put in the detailed budget table are resolved by staff category. So you may well have a situation where highly qualified staff is above the 80th percentile, but less qualified staff or more junior staff in your project is below this 80th percentile. So it would be in a way also more unusual if everybody working in the project or every staff category working in the project is above the 80th percentile. Especially if you need senior staff, it is clear that this is very likely going to be above the 80th percentile, or this would not be unusual at all. But then you just need to make sure that you explain why and how much you need the senior staff. In other words, it would be unusual that a project is run only by, let's say, senior professors. Normally there would also be some other staff involved, which would balance the average that you in the end apply for. But when you can make clear and you explain why senior staff is needed, then this high cost for the senior staff will also be accepted. Next question. Next question is, budget transfers between work package and or partners only require an amendment if we want these details in the grant agreement. But otherwise we can shift money as we prefer. Yes, I think here the clear answer is yes, that is fully correct. The grant agreement determines how we are going to pay, but you can certainly view it like that. If you deliver the work packages, if you complete the activities and you complete this grant, as we have seen is actually the case in the vast majority of lump sum projects that were completed so far, you will get the full lump sum. And then how you distribute that lump sum and the payments that we make inside the consortium is entirely up to the consortium and to the agreements that you take inside the consortium. We are not aware, as the funder is not aware, because you're not going to report on financial aspects at all. So therefore, you may indeed use the money in any way you see fit, as long as you carry out the project as described. Now, the adjusting, and I think here we may also hear our one or other of our guests again, adjusting the grant agreement to the reality of the project may still be in your interest in order to manage the project, in order to have agreement among all the partners of a consortium. But legally speaking, you're not required to amend it just because you have some shifts inside the project, especially if these shifts are small. Maybe you don't need this amendment. But if you maybe have bigger shifts between work packages and partners, maybe you have an advantage, organizationally speaking, to also reflect that new situation in the grant agreement. And that is then also only possible through an amendment. Not sure if any of our guests would like to come in on whether to use an amendment or not, but after I have confirmed legally you don't need it and you will get your lump sum if you deliver the grant. But organizationally speaking, that is a different question. Maybe somebody wants to comment on that.
Yes, it is Maria again. Indeed, for any minor changes, we don't do an amendment, but if it's something significant, then we do it via an amendment. So then it's for the consortium to evaluate what makes sense to be modified or not. But for significant ones, it's better to do an amendment, and partners prefer to do it in order to be more clear and in line with the actual situation.
Right. So next question is, how will controls work? There should be no financial controls. Yes, I mean, first, indeed, there are no financial controls because you have no financial reporting. Since you have no financial reporting, there is nothing we can control on the financial side. Controls will therefore focus on proper implementation and compliance with all other non-financial obligations. And for those, in principle, the controls are the same as for all other grants, because these obligations that I mentioned, proper implementation, and that actually includes that you complete the activities, that is the same as in any other grant. It is not that this is sort of a misunderstanding, perhaps, that that has developed over many years. It goes without saying that also actual cost grants must be properly implemented. That's is a prominent obligation in any grant agreement. And proper implementation means that the work is carried out as described in the work plan. In other words, is completed with all the possibilities to deviate and amend it and so on. But that is, in a way, on the very same footing for lump sums and for actual cost grants. Therefore, the controls that we do is, of course, mainly we check that indeed, according to your technical reports, it is plausible, it is reasonable to assume that you have done the work. And if we come to that conclusion based on your reports and the information available, then the lump sum is paid. Now, there is going to be, and this is under development, an additional level of ex post control, which again cannot be financial. It will be, again, on the technical implementation, and I mentioned more details are going to be released. In principle, ex post technical reviews are possible, of course. This is part of the grant agreement. We haven't really used that instrument routinely, but that is going to be introduced and going to be used a bit more to make sure our grants also ex post, that means after the project has ended, that we can have a control mechanism to convince ourselves, yes, these projects, for example, that have been fully paid were also completed in full. And that will all happen on the level of content, on the level of technical implementation. Next question.
I would like to add something here, if
Sure.
it is okay.
Sure, please go ahead.
Yeah, because I mean, that was also a point of discussion, the previous question, because it is, one question is about the control, but another question is about the audit, the external audit after the end of the project or during the course of the project, and not only the cost statements as we submit to the end of each reporting period. So the question is there, how in an external audit, how the project will be assessed. And as we know, external audit can happen in both financial and technical parts.
So,
and there, I mean, for us internally, For instance, it's very difficult to convince our administration that we should not, we're not obliged to keep timesheets.
Yeah, I heard that before, but okay, that is, I cannot do much more than repeat that indeed you don't need timesheets for lump sum grants and they will not be asked. And you don't need financial documentation for lump sum grants and this will not be asked. Because effectively there will not be, I think what you are referring to are the ex post audits, the ex post financial audits that we do for actual cost grants. Now this type of audit is simply not planned, not in the pipeline, and I can absolutely see no legal basis on which we could actually do these routine ex post financial audits as we know them from the actual cost part of the program. They will simply not happen for a lump sum project.
This is a very clear response and very, very useful indeed.
Yeah, you can find that also in the corporate guidance that the Commission issued on lump sums. You can find it in several presentations. You can find it in the in the quick guide on lump sums. All available documents on the Funding and Tenders portal. The most formal one of those, if you try and convince your administration, would be the corporate lump sum guidance. I think it's called How to Manage Your Lump Sum Grant. You'll find that on the portal. It's linked on our dedicated lump sum page as the detailed guidance. There, this principle is also very clear. There will not be financial checks, audits, and reviews. While, of course, any other aspect, any non-financial aspect, and that most importantly includes the proper implementation, that, of course, can be reviewed and can be audited is as for any other grants. Now, we would probably, what we have in mind is we are not really calling that audits, also to make sure that this is not being confused with the financial audits. What we are doing is, what we are planning is ex post technical reviews, and those would effectively be they would be based and would be very similar to the ex ante reviews that we do before we pay. Of course, we look at the same dimension. We look at whether the project has been properly implemented, and the only difference would be that we do this then after the project has been finalized or after a payment has taken place. And we would probably then go in a bit more detail. I don't want to go into a discussion what this is going to involve in detail, but the principle holds. It'll not be financial. It'll not require more documents than in any other grant, because every grant is obliged to keep on file the documentation needed to show that the grant was actually carried out. That I think in the grant agreement, in all grant agreements, we say you need to keep the documentation to prove proper implementation, like anything that shows you actually did carry out this work. And this is not the same as timesheets and invoices. So that is just invoices and timesheets means there was people working and there was money spent, but that is different, and this is what we're not going to check from documentation, as I also had it in my presentation as a number of examples that shows the activities themselves were actually carried out. And this is what you need to keep, and which indeed may be checked as part of ex post technical reviews for lump sums and for actual cost grants in the same way. So now coming to this next question, should audit costs still be included for lump sum projects when estimated budgets are over 430,000 euro? No, because you're not going to have to submit I think what this is referring to is the certificate on the financial statement, which is a statement by a certified auditor, and that is not needed, so therefore you don't include those costs. I think we don't need input from our guests on this one, and we can go directly to the next one. Andrea.
How do we know how many reporting periods are likely to be in a project beforehand? For example, 2 or 3 reporting periods. So usually the standard duration of a reporting period in Horizon Europe is 18 months. So you can already know from this how to plan your project. So it's really, depending also on you. But this is the standard one. So our reporting period is 18 months. It can be maybe also less than that, but you can express your preference also in the proposal template for that. And then during the grant agreement preparation, this will be fixed also with the project officer in charge of your grant. So yes, you have the means to express your preference for this.
Mm-hmm. I should maybe mention we have a frequently asked questions on exactly that point. So some of your questions, for example, if they don't get answered now, maybe it's worth checking out this frequently asked questions section on the portal. Again, if you go through the lump sum page, you get the subset of FAQs dedicated to lump sums. One on the number of reporting periods is there, is included there. Not sure if any of our guests would like to come in on the question of how to set up the number of reporting periods and how this works during proposal writing and during grant agreement, or if that has been answered.
Yes, maybe just to add that it depends on the project duration as well. For example, we have a project for 24 months, and then the reporting periods are 12. But it's true that usually it is 18 months, the normal reporting period.
No, absolutely. Yeah. So, for example, what I showed in the presentation was a 4-year project. So in a 4-year project, the standard would be 2 periods of 18 months coming to 3 years, and then 1 reporting period of 1 year coming to 4 years. So that would be the standard, because we try normally to minimize the number of reporting periods based on the standard reporting period of 18 months. So indeed, a 2-year project would have 2 reporting periods. A 4-year project would have 3 reporting periods. Therefore, that's the general rule. And thanks for pointing out. Obviously, the project total duration determines then, together with these 18-month rule, the number of reporting periods. Next question. At the end, if a work package is only partially completed, for example, 50%, the project will get paid only for 50%. How to distribute this lower lump sum among partners? Now, indeed, if you declare a work package 50% completed and this gets accepted by the project officer, the payment will be 50% of the pre-agreed share for that work package. That is correct. And there's 2 situations. A, we have no information on, let's say the default would be, in fact, we would pay 50% and the 50% reduction would be proportionally to all partners in that work package. As you saw on this lump sum breakdown, there is, for a given work package, there is a certain share for each of the partners involved in that work package. Now, basically, the share defined for each partner would be reduced by 50%, and that leads to an overall reduction of 50%. And that would be automatically calculated. However, there can be this situation that we are clear about which partner. Let's say there are 2 partners. One, and they have each 50% share in the work package. One partner did their work and the other one did nothing at all. And we know that, and this is really a clear-cut situation. There is no doubt, you agree, and we are convinced this is indeed, the evidence is there. That would lead to a payment of the full share for the one partner who did the work and of no payment to the partner who didn't do any work. But mentioned before several times, this depends very much on the information that you provide, on how you actually agree inside the consortium, and whether it can really be established that one partner did everything and another partner didn't do anything. So the default is you are collectively responsible to deliver each work package and the program and the project overall. That's a collective responsibility. So by default, if a work package is partially completed to 50%, everybody involved in that work package gets their share reduced by 50%. Yeah, I don't think, since that is a rather technical administrative question, I don't think we need to go into more detail. We had heard before, it is advisable to try and avoid that situation, of course, as much as possible. That goes without saying. Next question. maybe Andrea, you want to take that?
Sure. So where can applicants write the justification of the budget? And can inflation be a potential justification of higher costs compared to the dashboard? This is again a similar question that we had. So again, for extra justifications of the estimated costs, you can use the Any Comments tab of the Excel detailed budget table. And experts will also check that. And indeed, if your costs are higher than the values that are in the dashboard, inflation might be one factor for that. And also maybe pay rises or the qualification of the staff that will be involved in the proposal. As already mentioned, we know that senior staff will have a higher budget rate, monthly budget rate. Also, the number of staff efforts, so overall, will also play a role in this. So yeah, make sure to really justify everything that you need and be clear so that experts will make a wise assessment.
Let me add that maybe it's really useful if you have doubts on this part. Maybe you really watch the video for the dashboard. Maybe you look at the landing page of the dashboard where many of these aspects are explained. Inflation is explicitly mentioned as a possible reason. Inflation and recent pay rises. Our data are based on grants signed from 2022. So it's not that the data are age old, but okay, still since 2022 there was inflation. That's perfectly understood. So if you make the case that since these data we started to collect those data in those past few years, you had massive inflation or significant inflation. Absolutely, that's also one of the examples that we give both in the video and on the landing page of the dashboard. And we certainly also let our experts know about this. I think we can come to the next question. What if we mark a work package as completed, but the project officer does not agree? Will they request more work? Now, if you mark a work package as completed, you should, of course, this should be done on the basis that you find you have done the work as described in your work plan. That is the measuring stick. The project officer should certainly not request any more work than what is described in your grant agreement. So no new or additional work. But of course, they can certainly ask that you do the work that is in your grant agreement. So that I don't describe as more work, that is just the work that you have agreed in your grant agreement. So the question is not, do I need more or less? The question is, have you done that work that is described in the grant agreement for that work package? But yeah, well, of course there can be disagreements. The project officer comes to a certain finding. You have the opportunity to explain why you believe the work package is still as declared is complete. And then the work package then the project officer needs to take a final decision, obviously. And you need to go on. And the project officer will certainly give you the reasons why they believe that certain parts have not been completed, important parts, and on that basis he or she cannot accept the work package as complete at this point in time. Maybe there is any of our guests, I'm not sure if any of our guests actually had this situation already, that a work package was declared as completed by their consortium, but it was rejected by the project officer. In our experience, when we look at the data, this is actually relatively rare, as I mentioned in my presentation. So it would even be a surprise that some of the few guests we have here have had this case, but it's not excluded. Did any of you have this case? You declared something complete and it was rejected, so you had to come back later?
Yeah. Not in our case. Everything was approved. So if there were any deviation, they were clearly mentioned in the technical report. So we didn't have this situation that the project officer doesn't agree.
Thanks. So, so indeed, this is. I see your worry, and whoever asked this question. But when you look at the numbers that we put also in the presentation, like 99% of the lump sum grants are paid in full, and more than 99% of the work packages declared in the ongoing project in an intermediate payment situation are accepted. You see, it of course can happen. We don't give a carte blanche, but by and large, you can expect, if you carry out your project properly, you can expect really to get the lump sum. That is, I think, the message we should pass. So, next question. Do you want to take that, Andrea? Yeah.
Sure. So what about liability in lump sum funding? Is each partner liable up to their share of the budget, or is unconditional joint and several liability also possible? So in a lump sum grant, as in any other grant, the consortium is jointly responsible for the technical implementation of the grant, so for the proper implementation. And regarding the liability of their shares of the budget, indeed, so if one of the partner, as already mentioned, is not doing the work that they were supposed to do as described in the grant agreement, so they are not able anymore to do the work. Their shares will not be paid, but of course maybe these shares can be transferred to another beneficiary or to another work package through an amendment. And we also have some examples again in the corporate guidance of cases when a work package cannot be completed because some of the partners are not delivering the work that they were supposed to do. So please also check that.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure, Ulrich, if you want to...
Yeah, no, I mean, I cannot answer the second part of the question. That's this legal concept of unconditional joint and several liability. I'm not sure. To my knowledge, there is no difference between lump sums and actual cost grants in this regard. And indeed, in lump sum grants, each partner would be liable up to the amount, and that's work package by work package. They would be liable for the amount of their share in that work package. If you add up all work packages, then of course that is the total amount that is assigned to that given partner for the project. And indeed, that is the maximum liability they carry. I think this question of joint and several liability, it passed our legal department at some point. If that's important to you, I think you would have to either come back to the research inquiry service, and then we would link this to our legal department. I don't have really the legal expertise right now to answer that, but I can say there's no difference with actual cost grants here. Next question. If the reporting periods estimated during proposal are different of those indicated by EC when granting the project, is it possible to amend before signature? Absolutely. In that case, it is even, if you like, necessary, because let's say in the proposal you can indicate in your work plan what your desired, or you should even, what your desired reporting periods are based on this 18 months rule. Now, in the unlikely event, that depends, of course, what if you made a realistic cut of reporting periods based on this 18 months rule, or if there are additional considerations coming in. If the project officer disagrees with your choice of reporting periods, then indeed the reporting periods that will be introduced for that grant will be set up and will be different from what you proposed, and that will be defined during grant preparation, and of course that will be part of the grant. Now let me clarify again. Formally, there is no formally in the proposal there is no reporting period yet. This formally is only black on white in a table, is only part of the grant and is introduced in the grant agreement. And this is normally introduced by the project officer, in fact. But as I said, of course, the project officer will take into account your proposal and should take into account your proposal and should only deviate if there are good reasons for that. And then that is the final set. The final set of reporting periods will always be finally agreed and decided during grant preparation and then become part of your signed grant. and of course any amendments that might be needed as a consequence of changing those reporting periods, that will also be done during grant preparation in this case. Again, maybe a quick question to our panelists. If anybody had the situation, I don't know, that there was sort of a major reshuffle of reporting periods during grant preparation, or which was that an issue? I don't know. How did that work for you?
Not an issue in our cases. So
Okay.
for some projects, it was clear that we have, it was for Shift2Rail and Europe's Rail projects. They knew since the beginning that it's for 12 months because they are specific projects. So everyone knew. And then for other projects, we have the usual 18 months. So there was nothing specific. There was never a major topic about that.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah, but I know, of course, this question comes up. That's also why we put a frequently asked question on reporting periods, because when people design their grant, when they design the project and design the work package as well, the work plan, in other words, then the shape or the timing of the reporting periods is relevant, such that they, as was also mentioned by Maria, I think, such they can decide certain work packages which are finished by the end of some of those reporting periods in order to have the cash flow, because then these work packages can be completed in time for the payment session at the end of a reporting period. So it's understandable that the question comes up, what are the reporting periods and when do they end, and how do I arrange my work package in relation to those reporting periods? Next question from Marta. Sorry, it changed. So, to all the experts, what free resources you used to learn how create work packages and fill the detailed budget sheet? So this is an expert question. This is a question to the panel. I'm not sure what free resources are, but how you went about creating your work packages and the detailed budget table. Any volunteers to share their experience with that?
Yeah, actually, it was a bit a harder exercise than we usually do. But having quite it involves the contribution of all partners. So we had to explain to the partners that they have to break down all the expenses per work package. What is really helpful is that we learned that a good practice is to increase the number of the work packages. So this is the major change we see. Compared to the normal projects, the usual projects we have. So the number of work packages quite high, it's larger, can be up to 20. And then the work packages that some of the work packages, half of them are finishing during the first reporting period. And then we make the exercise, we break the costs within this period and the rest for the next one. So it is quite more complicated, but once you go through this, then it's easy.
If I may add from my experience, as I was supporting many coordinators on that. First of all, my background is doing all this. I was involved in FP7 project as well, Horizon 2020. So I'm quite familiar with the financial rules, etc. So I was mainly dealing with this detailed budget table. But when I started working in the LASAM project, I was reading a lot of materials. I was watching this kind of webinars where you explain the different principles, how it works. And then by doing the things, we learn how it really works. And then, as I mentioned earlier before, it was really important during the proposal phase to organize some kind of workshop for all the participants to explain the principles of the lump sum approach, to explain how the reporting periods work, the payments, etc. And then what I did is I was presenting the budget table with all the categories of personnel, of equipment, other costs, etc., with some explanation what those costs are about. So when partners had to fill in this budget table, it was much easier to know what is expected from them. And then, of course, for lump sum projects, what happens very often is that you have a bit more work packages because you decide to split some work packages in order to get some interim payments before the project. And so, yes, in general, please inform consortium so they are aware of what it's all about, and do your best to help them completing this, especially the detailed budget table where you have to detail all the costs.
Right, before we go to the next question, maybe one more time this principle that, of course, you need the detailed budget details for all projects. The actual cost projects do not have this Excel table, of course. They have a rather high-level budget table that you need to fill in with your estimated budget. But that hides the fact that you are absolutely obliged also in actual cost projects to have all these details and to keep them on file. That is a legal requirement. The idea in an actual cost grant is not that you put in any costs that you made up out of thin air or that you invented. Any of our proposals, of course, is required to be based on detailed budgeting and the best possible cost estimations that you have at the time of proposal writing. I emphasize again, the difference is that you share those details in the case of lump sums, but the difference is not that you have to have them, while in actual cost grants you might just as well invent the costs. That is really important to know. So the difference is the table and sharing the details that you must have in any case. So as such, it should not be new to use detailed budgeting for a project. This is something that I think in some people's heads they see actual cost grants as something where they can just make up the figures, and that is not true. So next question. The evaluators have a dashboard with reference data for normal personnel costs to ensure they are reasonable. Will they also have guidance for other cost categories? No, they will not. So far, at least, we don't have good statistical data on other cost categories that we can offer. Therefore, we can't give that guidance. I would also say that in my experience, the other cost categories are far less diverse. While for personnel costs, we have easily a factor 10 or more than 10 across Europe and the associated countries and beyond. Well, if we take the whole world, it probably goes to more a factor of 20 or 30 between low personnel cost and high personnel cost countries. So there's huge differences. But for many other cost categories, like how expensive it is to travel in Europe, how expensive it is to buy a piece of equipment, or how expensive consumables are, these costs are much less dependent on where the research takes place. So here we rely on the experience of the experts who are working in that same area. So they have experience with what should be reasonable costs for going to conferences, for buying certain pieces of equipment that are relevant in this area of research, and so on. So the question is, yeah, we use it for personnel costs because there we have the data, and also because personnel costs are roughly 2/3 of the budget, so they are the lion's share of a grant, are personnel costs. And for the roughly 1/3, which is for non-personnel costs, indeed, we rely on the experience of our experts and also on the fact that these costs are much less dependent on the geographical location. The next question, I'm sorry, we are going to skip. Thanks very much. Andrea, do you want to take the next one?
Well, it's more
it's for the
our
panelists.
panelists. So could panelists please comment on the additional work needed during pre-award, proposal preparation in particular, and how issues were handled? Thank you. So I think you already mentioned some, but if you would like to step in for this.
For me, I mean, it was this budget, the Excel file, it was the additional work. And also the complexity due to the choice to break the work packages and to have double or maybe triple the number of work packages. So this has a kind of workload on the preparation of the project, of the proposal. But of course, I mean, this is nothing compared to what we gain when we are when we run the grant.
Yes, I fully agree that it's a more significant effort during the proposal phase, especially preparing the budget table. Especially if you have a bigger consortium. I can share my experience. 2 years ago, we had to submit Europe's Rail projects, and they're quite huge with 27 partners with around 50, 60 affiliates, 48, one of the projects were 48 work packages. So you can imagine the size of the spreadsheet, because every time you generate more and more cells. So this could be quite a time consuming job in order to make everything it's correct. And then when you insert the budget in the portal, etc. So indeed, the effort is higher during the proposal phase, but then when the project starts, it is much more simplified, especially for the reporting, etc.
Right, maybe we can take 2 more questions and then wind up. It's 12 o'clock. So we have the question on the pre-financing. So generally, here's a very simple technical answer. It is no different than in any other grant. The pre-financing we pay, it could be 50%, it could be 80%, is paid at the very start. And then when you have a payment for a work package at intermediate stage, we have a so-called payment ceiling. So the maximum payment that you can get in the middle of the project, in the ongoing project, is 90%, is up to 90% of the whole grant amount, of the lump sum in this case. So we will never give you more than 90% of the lump sum, and the full lump sum can, in other words, the final 10% can only be paid at the end of the project. So in your example, you had 50% pre-financing, then the next time that a work package is paid, the payment can, or several work packages are paid, can go up to 90%, but no more. And then the remaining, and that of course includes the pre-financing. I'm sorry if that's not clear. So you could then, pre-financing included plus payment for the work packages, you can go up to 90%, and the full 100% can be reached only at the end of the project. So the last question I would like to take is the comment that it has now changed again. Okay, I mean, we had the question on or the comment rather, that it is going to be difficult for small organizations. I should really say I disagree here for various reasons. Let me say that we consistently get much positive feedback from small organizations and from newcomers. That is, there we have really good data from our surveys, also from our recent survey. Newcomers and small organizations are among the most positive about lump sum funding. And for me, that's fully understandable, because what really small organizations lack is the capacity and the understanding and the tools to handle actual costs. They suffer certainly more from actual costs than they suffer from lump sum funding. And for the complexity, well, I mean, our projects are multi-million euro, often multinational projects. Of course, there's a certain degree of complexity, and I'm not saying that lump sum funding is taking this away completely. It remains, of course, these projects remain big projects that have a degree of complexity, and lump sum funding was designed to make the financial aspect more easy, while everything else, of course, remains the same. And I think here the feedback that we get, especially from small organizations, shows this is going in the right direction. So I think at that stage, now it's already well after 12 o'clock, I would like to close the webinar. Thank you very much for your attention, and very much thanks again to our guests, the panel. I think their input was really useful and clarifying some practical aspects. Thanks very much to the audience and your questions. For further questions, again, do not hesitate to go to the Funding and Tenders portal, look at the guidance and at the videos there. If you have further questions, you can also use the research inquiry service. These questions would then be answered or by the RES colleagues, or come through to us if needed. Thanks very much. Have a very nice day. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.